Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. This is Joe Saponari of SciMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigman of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. For the freshest content, a peek behind the scenes, and more candid conversation about running our businesses, dealing with clients, fixing tough technical issues, and everything else you love about Command Control Power, we invite you to join us on Patreon so you don't miss any of this great content. Go to commandcontrolpower.com and click support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the patron-only shows right in your favorite podcast app. Once again, to join us on Patreon and get the latest patron-only episodes, visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. We hope to see you there, and thanks for listening.
All right, I finally have some follow-up on my G4 UniFi Doorbell issue, or UniFi G4 Doorbell issue, whatever you want to call it. But I had just a situation that I explained on an earlier show, just to bring everyone back into the fold, where I finally it was right before a vacation, a family vacation, and I have a couple of UniFi cameras, but the angle from the front door really isn't good. So I finally got the G4 Doorbell, and I think, Jerry, you have that as well. And you gave me some tips on a great mounting item from Etsy that helps mount it to the shingles really nicely. Everything was beautiful about that. But one thing I realized quickly, and this was right before vacation, is when I pressed the doorbell, I'd get the alert. The app was working great. It integrated into that, but my chime wouldn't work. And you had said you'd seen this before. One of the recommendations that you had was a specific type of transformer for the proper voltage. Jerry?
That's right, Sam. I found people were recommending this transformer on Reddit, and that's the one I recommended to you.
I got that transformer. Actually, initially, I went to Home Depot and got another transformer because I had read online as well that, hey, this could be your issue. And even though my doorbell had worked previously, they said older doorbells, the older transformers, you could just need to replace it. So I went out and grabbed that. And I had my neighbor chime in as well, no pun intended. He was trying to give me some advice about what the issue could be. Is I really don't think it's a transformer because it's the same voltage and it was working before. So I had purchased it anyway. So I had him put it in. That didn't work. And in the meantime, I had asked you guys, and Jerry had given me that transformer option. So I ordered that and a chime from Amazon because, as it turns out, UniFi has some specific chimes that they work on, mechanical chimes that are compatible, because mine just wasn't working. So the Home Depot transformer didn't work. I got the transformer that Jerry recommended, didn't work. I got the new chime, didn't work. I put in the new transformer and the chime, didn't work. So nothing was working. And I was just like, I don't know. I spent an evening doing this and I just threw up my hands. I was like, all right, I can't deal with this. But one issue that I hadn't initially noticed that was happening, a ghost chime was occurring. I noticed a hum when I walked by the doorbell one day, and it's constantly trying to ring the doorbell, but not at any predetermined time. Like when you press the button, it just would always happen. There was an adapter inside the box that I just never bothered to mess with. But as it turns out, it's for the communication with the mechanical chimes so that doesn't happen and the right signal gets sent. So I put that in. I was like, maybe that's my issue. I put that in and that stopped the ghost chiming, but the bell still didn't ring. So fast forward like weeks, I just left it, right? I'm like, all right, you know what? Who really rings my doorbell that I need to hear it? I don't care. I'm like, as long as the camera's working and when it gets pressed, it does take a snapshot. What's the worst that happens? Some person trying to sell me on their landscaping services, they ring my doorbell and I don't hear it. What do I care? Well, that's fine because no one really rings my doorbell anymore.
What if Best Buy comes by and says, we owe you money?
As long as they're not saying I owe them money. If they say we owe you money, I'm going to say come right in. Sit at my dining room table.
Welcome.
So I gave up. I left the cover to the chime on my dining room table. And it was just off with that adapter just hanging there. And I would walk by it every day and just ignore it.
That's sad.
I'm like, screw this thing. I don't even want to look at it. Weeks later, things died down with work. I have some downtime. So I email UniFi support. And I give them my whole story. And I say, listen, I tried a new transformer. I tried a compatible mechanical chime. You tell me something I don't know at this point. I tried to front load them with as much information as possible. So when they emailed me back, it was the typical, like, what version is UniFi Protect? What is this? And I'm like, oh, come on. But one of the questions was, it said at the bottom, also, Please go to settings and chimes and see what type of chime is selected. Huh. I go in there, select the chime, and I go in there. It's either none, mechanical, or digital, right? Huh. Mine is set to none.
Oh, man.
I go in there. I tap mechanical. I walk to my front door. Bing bong. I'm like, holy shit. Like, after all of that, the freaking thing was an option in the app. I could not believe it. But it works. But I'm an ass for not looking at the simple stuff.
Wow.
Wow.
Sam, truth be told, I always knew that was there when I was trying to sort out my issues, which were different from yours.
Yeah.
I had a single mechanical chime. I made sure that the front and the side door were selected with the mechanical chime, and I just couldn't get it to go. So the only way I could get it to go, I couldn't get them both to ring. I could get one or the other to ring. So I gave up on that. I had the first one run, the front door ring with the mechanical, and then Ubiquiti, of course, they have something you could buy for everything. They have a chime that you actually plug into the wall, and it's wireless and it joins your Wi-Fi network. And so I have that one set for the side door. So it wasn't cheap, but I gave up on mine. But geez, I wish I could have helped you way back when.
Me too, man. Where were you when I needed you? Getting me to buy transformers on Amazon and stuff.
I assumed you knew those settings were there. And it's like, are you on the right Wi-Fi network?
I know, it's so stupid. That was really just dumb. But I'm going with the reasoning of that. When I first set it up, I was heading out the next day and I didn't look at any of the settings. That's my reasoning to myself. That's why I didn't see it. And then I never looked there again.
Man, this stuff is just such a mess still. I think I was reading about this promise of the smart home in Wired magazine in the 1990s. One day, everything will just be like all great in your home. And the promise of a smart home, you can press a button and this happens. And we're still talking about doorbells at this point. There is like the most basic aspect of the home thing. And it's just such a mess. I had an issue yesterday. I was on the phone with the client and I've read about in our neighborhood, there's been some bike thefts recently, and including people go open a closed gate on a fence, like a tall fence, you can't even see behind it, and go and just take bikes from the backyard. And it's not like I live in a bad neighborhood or something, but it's strange. I was on the phone, I'm looking out my window, and all of a sudden I see a guy walking by past our house with like wearing a hoodie, and not to, I don't know, be stereotypical, but the guy had the hood on, some like local kid or whatever, and it was warm out. This guy's wearing a hood and it's warm out. This already, I think that's what made me think this is a little sketchy. And he's wheeling a bike, not riding it, but just like wheeling it down the sidewalk. And I look at where our neighbors tie up their two bikes, and there's only one bike there. So I quickly text our neighbors on the thread that we're on and say, is this someone's bike? I took a photo of the guy out the window walking by with his bike. And our neighbor like writes back right away, is it green? That's my bike. Oh, crap. So I hang up the phone with my client and I start running down the street to see if I can chase this guy. I wasn't worried I was getting into a situation I couldn't handle. I was just going to try to, hey, where'd you get that bike?
You did have a hoodie, Joe.
Yeah, true. I know. The thing is, I didn't want to engage on that level, but I did think, okay, if I could just get this guy's photo, so at least we just have that and a better photo, and maybe he would just leave the bike and leave. So actually, another neighbor here ran out after me. I went one way and they went the other way, and actually found the bike left in a park nearby, just a little small neighborhood park. And so recovered the bike. So that was good. But I thought having some kind of camera out front would probably be a good idea to see when packages are left or stolen, or just deter some of this stuff maybe.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I was thinking about this, and of course UniFi comes to mind, and I have the Dream router that I've been using since it was in early access, which has PoE built in, so I could even run an Ethernet wire and just power it that way, which appeals to me to have it be wired and also powered that way. But what would you guys recommend? We don't have any kind of smart home stuff. We have the UniFi router here. This might be something, since I live in a shared building, that the house is divided into apartments, and so we have other people. If we put it out front, that I would probably consider or want to share access to. But is there something like that comes to mind for you guys? I guess a Ring doorbell is a pretty common one, obviously. What do you guys recommend these days? Yeah,
because I think you wouldn't want UniFi in that case, because then you'd have to connect it to yours and share out usernames or create other accounts on your system. But Ring is the obvious contender there, I would think. I used to use Canary, but I don't think they have a doorbell. I think they just have the cameras.
Yeah, I guess a doorbell camera is probably the right way to be thinking about it, though.
Would that cover the whole area, or are you looking for a camera that can capture movement?
I guess I could even do both because where I'm positioned, I could easily run an Ethernet cable and have a camera be able to see out the window. So that would cover a much wider area. But then the doorbell camera could be for everybody to share. So so I guess, yeah, because that has the appeal of it joins anybody's Wi-Fi here. Like it could join mine wirelessly. And then I guess with Ring, I could give accounts to, in other words, they wouldn't have access to my UniFi system. They would just have access to the doorbell through the Ring app, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. Because it's not your equipment that you're sharing out. So that definitely makes the most amount of sense. And it's easy.
Yeah, that's right. And everybody could get it on their phone and everybody would be happy, I think, with something like that. And you could, like you said, just dedicate a camera personalized to run UniFi Protect.
Yeah, just for that extra kind of backup for my own peace of mind also, to have that overarching view as well as the doorbell. Yeah, it's a good tip. You've given us a lot of troubleshooting steps, Sam, to in case I have any issues with wiring this thing in, I guess I know who to talk to.
Oh, man. I get that's just sharing that story was just like, it was painful for me to just share because all that stuff I went through and it was a freaking setting in the app.
I guess that's a good one for the I should have known this feature, though, in the show.
Yeah. Some kind of corner or something.
So have you guys had this really annoying conversation with clients, just going back to storage? We're talking about storage recently on the Mac. And of course, this comes up in the scope of iCloud backup and all this stuff. Maybe I was a little bit slow to jump on the bandwagon of putting everything in the cloud, as we used to say, iCloud Photos, iCloud Backup, but I'm fully on board. And I've been recommending it to clients strongly for years now. These are great features. They're built in, they work really well, they're so convenient, well worth the few dollars per month, whatever the storage is going to cost you. So I have this like annoying conversation sometimes with clients where they're like hiring us to downgrade their storage plan. And sometimes it's spending time. All these monthly things add up. I don't want to pay Apple. I don't know where they get off charging me. Okay. 200 gigs a month goes for $2.99. Okay. That covers most people. You can go to, what is it, 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes for $9.99. Like I can see, okay, that adds up a little bit, but you're talking about backing up your iPhone, your iPad, probably other people in your family, their devices as well, if you're using the family sharing. You're talking about syncing your photos to all devices instantly, having the photos be backed up live into the cloud. Those are just like top of mind, great benefits of this. I would think that's worth $3. It's just not even a question to me. So we've had cases where clients, one of them several months ago worked with Tim and had him offboard iCloud Photos, turn off iCloud Backup, delete stuff from the cloud, get the storage down to 50 gigs, right? So that she could get it down to 99 cents a month. How much time did we spend doing this? She'll never make that money back at this rate. $2 a month, it's more than 15 minutes of my time. So she went through all that. And if you rewind the clock to even the year before that, when we first started working with this client, it took me a lot of effort to convince her that these were good features and to keep them. So eventually she decided she didn't want to keep them and had Tim offboard those features. And now here it was 6 months later. And just this last week, she had me go back and re-enable everything because she realized I took this video on my iPad when I was doing this lesson and I wanted to view it on my Mac and it's not there. Yeah, that's how it works. If you don't have that feature anymore, how much is your time worth at this point to try to figure this all out? So she was pretty easily convinced to go back to the $2.99 plan. So that was a win. Made her life easier, pays a few dollars a month, paid me to redo the work that she had us undo 6 months ago. Fine, everybody's basically happy. So then the next day, last week, I have a different client who had the opposite plan. She's on iCloud, everything's full, and she's going out of her way not to upgrade to, again, from 99 cents to $2.99. So I'm explaining to her, you don't have backups of your devices right now. Your iPhone's not backed up. Your iPad's not backed up. Your photos are not syncing because your storage is full. So those are also not backed up. And and you don't have access to them, even if you just don't have any of these features because you don't have enough storage to actually use the features. So this was like a 15-minute conversation. And instead of paying $2 more per month, she had a 15-minute conversation with me, an annoying, dragged out, pointless conversation about it. And she could have just paid for a year of iCloud storage or whatever it was with that. So I posted this out of frustration to you guys and to the Slack channel. And I thought this was funny from Dave Provine. I've seen this before, but it's on oatmeal.com/blog/apps. And it's just this really funny comic about how people think of this stuff. And the setup is they're buying a cup of coffee for $7, $9 with the extra features, whatever. They're paying $13 to go see a movie. They're paying $20 for popcorn and soda. They're buying a new iPhone for hundreds or thousands of dollars. No problem, no question any step of the way. And then they get to the point of, do you want to buy this app for 99 cents? Get out of here. 99 cents? Software? What? It's the perfect encapsulation of this whole issue with clients. I thought it was pretty funny, but I'm sure people could relate to that. Like, how do you convince somebody of what the right thing to do is? I was not a match for this person after a 15-minute conversation about it, and I gave up.
Let me preface by saying I haven't dealt with this, but have either one of you guys ever had a client want to go off the cloud completely on ethical reasons or big brother kind of fear? Because I could almost understand that kind of sensibility. It's irrational. And who was it? Larry Ellison, who said privacy is dead. If you're on the internet, privacy is dead. Have you ever dealt with anybody like that?
I've dealt with a couple of people that have threatened to go that way. And either, you know how sometimes it feels like they're taking it out on you, but they're just kind of yelling in your general direction. I've had that. And
My wife does that.
Yeah. But yeah, like I've had that where they're upset about the cloud. And I think especially a few years ago, as this stuff really just started to trickle in, like Microsoft started charging monthly, Adobe was charging monthly, and people were very upset about it. But only one person that has actually stayed off the cloud, and I haven't talked to him in a bit of time, but he was an architectural designer. He used AutoCAD on a PC, and he literally would only work on this computer that had no wireless, no Ethernet connection. It was a tower computer. He had swappable hard drives. He would even take them out at night and put them in a safe. It was like really strange behavior, actually, but just made sure that none of his work was ever connected to anything. And if he had to share that with somebody because he collaborated on a job, he would have to take that hard drive over to that person's office. That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, you wonder, like, there's a risk and reward aspect. Being on the cloud or in the cloud or whatever has a certain risk associated with it, but the reward is pretty high. And likewise, you can eliminate some of the risk, but like, how much effort is it worth to go through that to avoid the cloud? Like, it's kind of inevitable, and you can have commentary about why society shouldn't go this route and what the potential pitfalls are. And those are good conversations, but in a practical matter, on a day-to-day basis, you just need to either sign up for this stuff or jump through a lot of hoops to have the same features or similar features. If you're not going to use iCloud Photos, you need to learn how to manage your photos properly. And that means regularly importing from your devices to wherever you're keeping your library and then deleting the photos from the device that you took them on regularly to prevent it from filling up. Who wants to go through that? That's annoying, and nobody does that properly on a regular basis.
Yeah.
That guy's the real exception, actually following through with staying disconnected, but it's really hard to do that. The other place this comes up is my now world-famous upgrade tutorial that I talk about all the time, where I bring people through this process of you have to understand how to deal with passwords. You can't just throw your hands up and tell me that, oh, passwords suck, and I just use the same thing for everything, and it's a huge mess, and I add an exclamation point and whatever. You can't do that anymore. You have to get on board with this. And of course, the pathway to like getting a handle on passwords is using a password manager. iCloud Keychain is built in. It's great. That's the one we recommend. And then they ask, yeah, but then my passwords are all in here. Are these scraps of paper better? Is this a better system? You don't have a handle on this, and you have papers with passwords all over your desk. So this is not better necessarily. And they're worried like somebody can hack them and get access to all their passwords. And I explain there are safeguards in place. Like they need your iCloud password. They also need a device password, like your Mac password or your iPhone passcode, to get access to the passwords that were synced to that device. If then they're like, on the flip side, what happens if I lose this and that, whatever? You can reset access to your iCloud account. If you have your iCloud password, great. Just buy a new iPhone and sign in. You're pretty much good to go. If you don't have anything, and then you still own your phone number, so you can have a text message sent to you to recover access to your iCloud account, sign in on a brand new device, and you're back up and running with your saved passwords. So I kind of address those issues that they're concerned about, the issues where they might lose something if they trust in a system like a cloud password manager, and the risk of trusting a system like that. But again, it's all trade-offs. And it's kind of how well is your system working for you? If you're refusing just on moral grounds or whatever to be not in the cloud, yeah, it sucks because like that's the way of the world now. If you're going to refuse that, you have a lot more work to do to learn how to like avoid it and function properly.
There are a couple of pieces to this too, because we're also talking about, let's say, an iCloud situation or a personal situation, but there's also that argument for business too, right? We have plenty of people using Synologies and local storage and all that stuff, but there's an argument to go to the cloud for even that with SharePoint or Dropbox or even Google Drive or a combination of both. That's where you sync SharePoint down to a Synology, and then you do have a local storage point for when you're in the office, or because I'm also trying to get people away from VPNs in general. It's a bit archaic to have to go back, and I have clients that do it, so I'm not like poo-pooing on anyone that does it, but for them to have to go back to the office just to retrieve a file when they could sync it to a secure cloud storage, that would be the ideal situation. And I'm dealing with this right now because we have a customer who has an office in New York and multiple other offices, and the New York VPN has been wonky lately. And now we're dealing with all this overhead. And I'm like, I've been talking to you guys for 2 years to try and get you off of this, and it still hasn't happened. So if it takes me longer to fix this, that's on you at this point, because I've tried to make you go the other way. But it's interesting that you brought this up too, Joe, because I was talking about moving them to something like SharePoint, but the storage components, because they're a 365 shop, the storage components are a little concerning with that, because the cost per terabyte in SharePoint is not great if you have a lot of data. And if you guys have looked at SharePoint pricing, it's weird. It's like you get 1 terabyte plus, I think it's like 100 gigabytes per user, and that you got to total that all up, and that becomes your total storage for SharePoint. And I talked with Microsoft support about this, not to go too far off on a tangent, but I was trying to get them on SharePoint, and they have 8 terabytes of data. I'm sure not all of it is current, but they have a lot of data. And they're like, you can go with SharePoint, and since you have, I don't know, I forget how many users, you get like 2.4 terabytes, and then it's going to cost you on top of that 20 cents per gig. We need another 5 terabytes. That'd be like $1,000 a month. And the guy's, yeah, what? Or you could go with our OneDrive for Business plan. This is why I find it ridiculous.
Yeah.
You can go to our OneDrive for Business plan 2. That's $10 a month. Technically, it's one user, but you can share it. And you get 5 terabytes for $10. There's no rhyme to any of this, right? Because it's not like it's costing you this amount and you have to make that money back to make that $1,000 per customer, because you're clearly selling that same storage for $10.
Right.
What the hell?
Yeah. Not to mention, trying to get answers to any of this without a salesperson is tough. I looked into this recently as well for a client who's already like a Microsoft 365 user, and they're, again, trying to migrate from on-premises to some kind of cloud storage. And so we looked at SharePoint, and the pricing, I thought what I read was that it was like 1 terabyte, maybe it was a different plan, 1 terabyte per user. So nowhere could I figure out the answer on that page, or through searching the forums or searching their knowledge base or anything, the answer to the question, if they have X amount of storage, like how do you price that? And if you get whatever 1 terabyte per user, is that pooled like across all the users, and how does it work that there's basically the way people function is there's a big folder that everybody has access to, is like 1 terabyte owned by this person and a different terabyte owned by that person. The salesperson said, yeah, it's pooled. So if you have 5 users, then you get 5 terabytes. And again, don't quote me on that because we didn't pursue it much further and the client went a different direction. But that was what I got from sales on SharePoint. But I think to your point, if you have relatively few users and a lot of data, then cloud storage is cost prohibitive in a lot of cases. But if you have like under 5 terabytes and a handful of users, it's a really good option. If you price it out, some people are just anti-monthly. I don't want to pay for the cloud storage. It's just this intangible concept of bits in the air. Why should I pay for that? It's nowhere. It doesn't exist. No, you're paying for the infrastructure. You're paying for support. You're paying a monthly fee for someone else to maintain that storage for you and make sure that you have access to it. Look at the cost of like an on-premises server with X amount of storage space and the labor to set it up, the ongoing maintenance cost, like whether that's a regular, you should have a monthly server maintenance thing or updates that need to be installed that somebody needs to do. You need to hire me to run the server on a monthly basis anyway. So look at that cost over the course of whatever amount of time. Look at the cost of the upfront hardware over, say, let's just say it's going to have a 5-year lifespan versus the monthly cost of the same amount of storage in the cloud times that many months. A lot of times they compare pretty favorably and cloud is cheaper. And yet people are still resistant to the monthly cost. They like the idea of I just buy this stuff and then I own it. It's here. Yeah. It's in my office.
We talk a lot about Synology. Have either one of you guys actively deployed and have clients using Synology Drive? Because I've had two clients, not a lot, but two. One has been using Synology Drive when it was Synology Cloud Station for years. I say years, at least 5 years. And I have an attorney who's been using it for 2 years, and there's never a hiccup with it. Have you guys looked into that at all?
Not at all. I can't say that I have. So is it meant for collaboration and multiple users and available directly in the cloud?
Yes, absolutely. And you can send people file links like you can with Dropbox. It pretty much functions. It doesn't look like Dropbox. It doesn't really have that same kind of look and feel, but in concept, it runs the same. And you could have as many users as you want. And it's right off the Synology, and it works well. And you can specify local sync or cloud sync, just like you can with Dropbox, where you could say, keep my files local or keep them in the cloud. It works great.
Yeah, I have one client that's using that it was set up by a prior consultant for like her assistant to have access to the Synology. The Synology lives in her home office and she has local access to it. And then her assistant has whatever it's called currently, Synology Drive or
Synology Drive, yep.
Yeah.
And it works on iOS too.
Yeah, no, it's great. Conceptually, it's great. And it's a nice hybrid approach like that because you do have the local storage and then you have the ability to have some stuff synced. Like you said, they can just work out of the local folder. And it syncs it over to the Synology. So it's great. One recent interaction I had with it was that it stopped working because it needed an update. Whatever, I forget if it was the prior version that finally stopped working or just like an old version of the current, Synology Drive software that needed to be updated. You just can't trust people to do updates all the time. They ignore it. Eventually it just stopped working, and that's when we got the call. And that's all. It was just like update the software and then I forget if we even had to re-authenticate or something like that. But yeah, that is a nice option to know about for the hybrid approach where, like Sam said, you want to avoid VPN and stuff, and you still want like fast local access, nice bulk storage. Maybe you have people that work out of different folders, or they can just have access to the folders on the server. Yeah, through Synology Drive, and have it not sync locally for most of the stuff, but have their kind of hot folders syncing. That's a great tip, Jerry.
I think I would check it out. I think if it wasn't for, in this particular case, this customer needing a lot more storage, then 365 is just fine with SharePoint because it's built into their cost. So it's what they know, it's what they're familiar with, and it would just go on with that Microsoft theme. But now that we're looking for this job for a lot more storage, then it becomes cost prohibitive. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll take a look at the Synology Drive. I really haven't played with it.
My only slight concern with that is like the fact that it isn't on the third-party software running all the time. You have to run the Synology Drive software, just like same concept as Dropbox for that to work. Whereas like a VPN is native. It's built into the Mac, and connecting to an SMB share is built into the Mac. So there's something appealing about it being all like first party and no additional software needed. It's not like there's a cost. I don't think there's a cost to the Synology Drive software running on each client machine, but it's just like one more kind of component that you have to, in a certain sense, keep it updated and that. But yeah, I still think it has a lot of appeal over VPN.
Yeah, there's pros and cons. You could make the argument that VPN is not ideal for people who are working with Adobe Creative Suite. And where if you had a Synology Drive situation or Dropbox situation, for the most part, that works because you can't work live off the server using a VPN with Adobe.
Yeah, officially you can't. You never have been allowed to officially, but it in my experience, like everybody does, and it mostly works. And you can make it work even if over a slow, like limited bandwidth connection, there's certain things you can do, adjust the preview resolution in InDesign and turn off, certain pre-flight features and stuff like that. There's some tweaks you can do, but yeah, it's all dependent on the internet connection. If that connection is brittle and tends to drop out, VPNs are not very resilient with that, and your file could be in the middle of saving and the thing goes down, and that's not good. So yeah, VPN has a lot of issues, whereas like something like Synology Drive would handle that better. You're just saving locally essentially, and then that software handles the syncing it back up to the mothership server. So following up a conversation I had recently with Jerry, I think it was just you and me, Jerry, talking about this, but Sam, I'm sure you're looped into the concept of whether to scramble the jets every time there's some kind of Apple security update and send newsletters out to all your clients and say, we talked about how like the news just seems to love these things when something comes up where Apple releases an update that says, Apple has received a report, this is actively exploited in the wild kind of thing. And then the news just jumps on that and says, you have to update. And it seems like the story is just out there everywhere telling people to update. And I had this come up just this week dealing with a client who had one of these hacking situations. And he suggested, he said, you might want to send a newsletter about this. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to, because this just happens every day. I'm not going to send a newsletter every day. Watch out for this Best Buy scam or whatever, the current Norton scam or whatever. Look out for Gmail addresses trying to sell you Norton subscriptions. That's not real. I'm not going to do that. What is the solution? Just communicating to people that you just really have to always stay up to date. And I'm just beating the drum of always run software updates. And I used to say when an update comes out, wait a couple weeks. These days I'm saying maybe wait a week. I'd much rather have people like just not wait and just install it. But if it's like you're facing a deadline, okay, I can see deferring that a little bit. The recommendation on upgrades was usually like wait at least 3 months. These days I'm leaning more toward wait a month or two. That's, I think, where I'm going to be with Ventura. We'll see. So the other thing I wanted to just bring attention to is something I read in the Scripting OS 10 newsletter about this. There's a couple new features. There's a new feature called rapid security responses, and that's currently in iOS and coming to Ventura. And basically what this means is a rapid security response can deliver important security improvements more quickly before they become part of other improvements in a future software update. So you may not have to wait for 0.1 or whatever to come out to get the security improvements. They can actually be deployed kind of like ongoing, like automatically, without patching the OS per se, just to, patch like a certain area of the OS kind of live. I mean, I'm not totally clear on a technical sense, but essentially you can do this, and I guess it's in iOS 16, settings, general, about. You can tap on iOS version and you can actually remove a security update from there. So these security updates can be deployed automatically and then removed like by the user if for some reason you don't want that improvement anymore. So have you guys heard about this? This was brand new to me when I read about it recently.
As far as the technical details as well, I'm in the dark as much as you are, but I did hear about it, and I do subscribe to Armin's newsletter too, which is great information. But it's going to be interesting to see how it's deployed and how that mechanism works if you wanted to remove it. I don't know the ins and outs of that either.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. Just as the name implies, rapid security response. It's something that I'm assuming it's going to be, what do you call it, opt-in, like where basically it's just enabled because it's probably best for most people. You can, I believe you can turn it off. And like I said, you can remove these updates as they're applied, which is another new thing. You can't downgrade from 15.7 to 15.6 or something like that. But whereas you can actually remove these little automatic rapid security responses. So I think that's probably really good overall for platform security. Also, again, in the context of people just not wanting to update, it's never a good time. It's like the phone, pretty soon the Mac with Ventura should just do the right thing. If Apple's aware that something is actively exploited and they have a quick fix for it, yes, just install it, especially if it's silently happening in the background.
Do you look at your clients' computers in Adigy and days since the last reboot, and some are 30, 45, 60, and you look at these people and you go, what could you possibly be doing? Like, how is your computer even successfully performing when you haven't restarted it in this long? And what could you possibly be doing that's so important that you can't restart your computer once in a while? I just get annoyed. I mumble to myself as I look at my Adigy profile.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. I think they're not operating, very well. They're suffering through it. And this is like those little needling issues in the background where the fans are going full speed and everything. They're getting the spinning beach ball and they're just suffering along. And they don't even realize that just a restart would be a good idea. Why isn't that built in? Why doesn't I have the famous command control power script in Adigy?
Restart.
Exactly. Where it's like it prompts the user to restart. It's like it's been 7 days. You probably should just restart for good measure. Or it's been, I forget what I even have it set to, but it's been 21 days. We're going to restart unless you tell us not to. And then beyond that, it tries to be more forceful about getting people to restart. But Apple could build in something. Hey, Spotlight's been pegging your CPU for the last 3 days using 300% of your CPU. Like, we're going to restart unless you tell us not to. Apple could be better about just restarting in those conditions.
When it knows the system is being taxed, a recommended restart situation.
Yeah, and maybe it's to opt in and they turn it off. You could just switch it off if you're like a power user or something like that. But I always think about this stuff. We have certain assumptions because of the way things were for the last 30 years or something in computers. And it's, yeah, I agree with you. Like, people should know you got to restart. But you know how often this comes up with somebody on the phone where I'm like, I recommend restarting once a week. I give people that advice all the time. And no one really knows that until I say it the third time to that person. And it fixes the issue, a different issue, 3 different times. And they've paid the bill for 15 or 30 minutes of my time 3 different times. And then they're like, you know what? I am going to restart next time. Then it sinks in. So people don't get it. People don't know about that. People don't understand computers on that level, that they need to restart, that it's part of their good computing hygiene. It's just something that they have to learn that is necessary. And go up to the Apple menu, choose restart. We think it's, oh, they're so silly, they don't understand that. Well, they don't. So like, why doesn't the system just do the right thing? Probably should just proactively restart maybe app once a week. That's an easy one for people to understand. If it's just sitting there idle, just do it. Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Yeah.
I've had this one business client, and he was having some issue with Apple Mail. And how much would you charge me for just a general cleanup? I couldn't get Apple Mail to close successfully because he had email after email open in multiple windows, like window after window, no exaggeration, 30, maybe 40 windows. And they were all different ways that he would respond to clients. And it was like a previous email that he had sent. So he would cut and paste. If he got an email coming in, he would go to this window, which referred to this type of response. And that's the way he worked, with his Apple Mail program running all the time, which is fine, right? But 30 or 40 open windows. I said to him, how do you even find these? Like, they're so layered on top of one another. It's just like a gigantic pile of papers. And I remember I think I force quit mail on him. And, you know, he held it together really well. And this is before I really knew how deep the rabbit hole went. And he said, it took me a long time to open up all those emails and even find the right ones that he had open. Like, they were his reference material. It was like papers all sprawled on a desk, and he needed to have all those papers there to know how to navigate through his business on a day-to-day basis or an hour-by-hour basis. And so and I said, we can't run your mail like this. It's just not designed to work like this.
It's an interesting analogy that I never even thought of, Jerry, the way you're talking about. It's like having a bunch of papers spread on the desk. I never put those two together, but it makes sense. Probably the type of personality that would need that on the digital level also would have that on an analog level, just to have that spread out everywhere.
Who operates their mail like that? It was like, it's amazing. He's a nice guy. He's a good client. And I don't know if he still does that, but now he's got a more powerful machine. He's got a MacBook Pro M1 and he can do this. But man, just never saw anything like that in my life.
Yeah, that's a funny use case for a new system. Like, I want the most powerful system out there so I can manage my mail. I need 50
mail windows.
Yeah, exactly. I see people with the same kind of situation with work in progress minimized in mail. So there's 40 little windows in the dock. Every icon on the dock is like 16 by 16 pixels or something, because the dock is like tiny, because they're just like all their work in progress is minimized down there. And yeah, it's a mess. It's a total mess. And that's it. So like, to me, that would be an opportunity to do a session on text expander. Let's put all these form letters into text expander snippets, which, by the way, they can even work like a form letter. Like, literally, text expander can jump up and say, "Dear blank," and you can select from the list, Mrs. Smith. You can have it auto-populate if you're emailing the same 20 people on a regular basis, or you can just have it be a blank that you type into. I look forward to hearing back from you in 30, 60, 90 days. You can select from the pop-up. You can optimize that workflow using proper tools. The person has to be willing to pay the money up front to have you train them. They have to be willing to change in general. And they have to be willing to really invest the time in getting that set up and practicing using it. But obviously, that'll probably save them a lot of time and a lot of aggravation, and even more time when you consider, how a system like that's a non-system that they're using, can be disrupted. And they can take half a day to get back up to speed if that happens. Whereas if they use the proper tools, I think it's not going to have that kind of disruption, I think.
If you had those 40 email windows open or the 40 icons in the dock, or you had 40 tabs in Google Chrome, those are real good reasons not to want to restart your Mac.
Yeah.
So you could see why these people do that. But you would think, like you said, Joe, there should be some way that the operating system can somehow train them that you need to, at the very least, restart.
Yeah, I think about this sometimes. You can't just pop up a window for everything. That's like my answer to everything is pop up a window to the user and it says you should restart, click restart. Because they're just going to cancel every single time it pops up. Cancel. Like a lot of my clients probably do. I try.
Move it to the corner of the screen.
Exactly.
So only a little corner of it is peeking out.
Out of sight, out of mind. All the important messages are just like stacked in the corner there. Same thing with the desk. You're totally right. That's such a good metaphor because they probably have their overdue bills like in the corner of the desk. I know I need to do this. And that's why I'm thinking Apple should, like, if they were to build in something like this, like a proactive restart kind of thing, old Apple wouldn't have ever done this because it signals weakness. Our system never has to restart. We're not going to tell the user that they need to restart because it's going to slow down if they don't restart. It never slows down. It's perfect all the time. But I think like modern Apple would be more pragmatic about it and maybe include something like this, but how do you implement it? And again, I think it's a matter of just like monitoring the system. If it's idle and the apps that are open have automatic saving of state or whatever, and there's probably no consequence to the user by simply just restart. Just do it. Just do the right thing. And then tell the user when it comes back up that your system was restarted. It's a different question if it's in file. If they have File Vault enabled, then restarting doesn't just bring them back to where they were. It brings them to the File Vault login. So I don't know, maybe you do an auth restart in that case. What's the difference? Like it's already a running system. It can just do an auth restart. I guess it needs the user's password. So maybe that's not technically something that could, I don't know. Maybe that's not possible. Apple can put a few people on this and probably save a lot of people a lot of aggravation by just restarting. People would save money by not having to call me.
I don't know. I agree with what you're saying in terms of you can't have a pop-up for everything. I like the idea of a pop-up that tells them how long their computer has not been restarted in, which I've done before, which is just a little bit more, I don't know. It could be enough of a jolt, not if it says 7 days, like you have a threshold as to when it pops. If it's been a certain amount of days, then an alert shows up and it shows you how many days it has been. For the people that aren't going to restart, it's not going to freaking matter. They'll be like, so what? But anybody that, I don't know, could take that advice and run with it, there's a possibility there, but I don't know what else to do besides a pop-up or besides them calling you for support. What else can you really do? Now, Apple's, I don't think they'll ever build it in like that.
Maybe I'll send an email newsletter just every week. It's your weekly reminder to restart your Mac, close all those mail windows and just hit the restart. Yeah, I guess like a notification center notification is better than like a modal dialog box popping up in the middle of the screen. And like you said, if it just informs them, your Mac was last restarted 14 days ago. Apple could even take the pulse of the system and measure the performance. How is it working on a normal day after a restart? It's really fast. Maybe they don't even need to measure that one. They can detect that some process has been pegging the CPU for days. They should be able to detect that all their built-in stuff is functioning properly or not, like within spec or running rampant on the CPU or chewing up a bunch of memory. And just that could trigger this like notification saying, restarting will make your system faster. Do you want to do that now? I wouldn't word it like that, but there's lots of ways you can just put that in a notification, informing the user that this would help improve the performance by 50% and it hasn't been restarted in 14 days. And we'd recommend doing this proactively every week or something.
How about send out an email that says the U.S. government cybersecurity and infrastructure security agency encourages you that all affected users to restart now.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it look like a news article. Yeah.
Apple is aware that users in the wild are actively not restarting. I'm from Best Buy. We owe you money. If you restart, we can get this process started.
Of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of Apple